right, this video is going to go over all the details and things you need to know about functions, including key vocabulary and any math that is involved. The majority of this topic is knowing the vocabulary. There's a very few actual math calculations that you'll have to do. So again, learn that vocabulary and learn what it's referring to, and it does make this chapter a little easier. All right, the first thing we want to do is define what a function is. Right? And a function in math is a relation where every element of the input is paired with exactly one element of the output. Right, and what all that is a fancy way of saying that your inputs, which we know are your x values, cannot repeat. If they do repeat, then it's not a function. Right? So in order for something to be a function, your x values cannot be used more than one time. And that's all that definition is really pertaining to. So if a question ever pops up that says, is this a function? Look for those x values to determine that answer. Right? The next vocabulary word we're going to have to define and use a lot is the word domain. Right? And you've already seen some synonyms for the word domain in a previous video and set of notes. All right? But we'll recap what they are just so you have them on this one. Domain is the set of input values in a function. Okay, so it's the numbers that are located in the input spot, which is the same as the known as your x values. Right? And we should know that input, x, and domain are all in the synonym category for each other. Right? The other word that goes along with domain that is always hand in hand with it is the word range. Right? And when we're talking about range, we're talking about a set of output values in a function. And if you remember your synonyms for output and range, the y values are part of that list. So anytime you're looking for the range, you're looking for the y values that are present. All right, so now the next set is going to be asking you to do some examples, and I'll show you what they look like, and I'll show you the exact definition and directions that you'll see, and then we'll practice some of them. So your first set of directions are going to say this. For each function, complete the table, which we already know how to do, and name the domain and range. So this is the new part. And there are some certain ways that we have to name the domain and range, so I will go over those as we go to do them. All right, we're going to do a couple of these to make sure you're understanding. All right, so the first one is going to give you a function. F of x is how you read that, not f times x, but f of x equals -8 minus x. That f of x thing is the same thing as the letter y. So if you don't like seeing f of x, you can turn it to the letter y, and it says y equals -8 minus x, and that's something that you're used to. Right? So just know that they're interchangeable and that you may see one or the other. It doesn't have to be one specific way only. All right, so when we go to set up our table, you're going to put -8 minus x here in the middle, and your x and y is on the outside. Right? And you're going to pick your own values for x. Right? So we're going to use -1, 0, and +1. Right? And the way we're going to go through this is we're going to plug it in, and then we're going to come out with the y values, and then we'll actually name the domain and range. All right, now be very careful with your signs on this one, because this is where students tend to mess up. It's -8 minus -1, right? And you'll notice that you just created double signs right here, so that turns into a plus. -8 plus 1 makes -7 when it comes out. Right? Then we do -8 minus 0, which is just -8. and we do -8 minus 1, which is -9. Right, so there's our completed table. All right, that's the first part of the directions. The next part says name the domain and range. Right, and this is how we do that. You write D equals, because that stands for domain, and then your values for your domain and range are always included in the braces, those squiggly lines. Right, and you'll get better at drawing them if you're a little rusty at it at the beginning. Right, but inside of those braces are all the possible values from your table that are your domains. And remember, domain is the x values. So if you look at our x column of our table, right, then that means this column right here, those are my domains. And I'm just going to list them in the order that I have them. It really doesn't matter what order you find them in. Right, just remember to close your braces because that's the only 3 numbers we have from this table. Right, then to list the range from this table, we're going to start R equals, open up your braces again, okay, and then range is the y values in your table. So that's those 3 numbers. And we have -7, -8, and -9. And close your braces. All right, so that's what it looks like when you complete the table and then turn around and write your domain and range from the table. All right, so let's take a look at another one. I'm going to give you a different function. And this time, I'm going to give you the x values you have to use. All right, sometimes they'll do that, and other times they'll let you choose. But if they give them to you, you got to use what's given to you. So our function is f of x equals 2 minus 3x, or if you prefer, y equals 2 minus 3x. In our table, we're going to have 2 minus 3x in the middle, and our x and our y part. And for the x value, you are given -2, 0, +3, and +4. You can't change those. You have to use them because they were given to you. All right, so now let's plug in those 4 numbers and see what we get as a y value. We have 2 minus 3 times -2. Now here's where you've got to pay attention to order of operations. Order of operations says you multiply before you do any kind of subtraction. So I'm going to come over here to the side and show you what this looks like for each one. 2 minus 3 times -2. You're going to multiply this piece right here first. -3 times -2 is a +6. Then bring down the 2. 2 plus 6 is going to give you your 8. That's your y value. If you go left to right in the calculator, or if you do anything different than what I just showed you, your answer will not come out correctly. So be super cautious as you're doing this. Now for 0, it doesn't really matter because everything's going to come out the way it should no matter which way you do it. All right, 3 times 0 is 0, so you've got 2 minus 0, which is just going to give you 2. All right, it's the numbers that are different than 0 that's going to make a difference. All right, so then if I'm going to plug in 3, I've got 2 minus 3 times 3. Right? Again, it's important to do the multiplication piece first, then do left to right. So -3 times 3 is -9. Put the 2 back in, and now you've got the problem 2 minus 9, which is going to make -7 happen. All right, then we'll do it with same thing with 4. 2 minus 3 times 4. Once again, put the 4 right there. Do the multiplication first. -3 times 4 is -12. Put the 2 down. 2 minus 12 is going to give you -10. So that's what your completed table should look like. Now we want to list the domain and range for it. So our domain equals, and remember that's the x values that were given to us, -2, 0, 3, and 4. Close your braces. And the range values are the numbers we came up with. So they're our y column. 8, 2, -7, and -10. Remember, it doesn't matter what order those numbers are in, as long as you have all 4 of them. Okay. All right, for the next part of the notes, what we're going to do is take a look at some tables already made, and all you're going to have to do is name the domain and range. So it's just focusing on that one aspect. They'll already be completed. Okay, so once the tables are here, we're going to name the domain and range for them. Right, and the tables are not going to have that middle column because you don't need to know what the rule is. You just need to know what the x values and the y values are. So for our first table, this is problem number 3, right, it's going to have 5, 7, 7, and 3 in the x spot, and then it's going to have 10, 9, 10, 9 in the y spot. All right, so when you're doing a chart like this and you're trying to write domain and range, right, one thing you want to make sure that you do, okay, and I'll put this over here on the left so you can see it, double star it, do not repeat values. Okay, in domain and range, we do not repeat numbers. You only write one of the numbers that are there. So if I'm looking for my domain, I see 5, 7, and 3. Just because there's 2 7s doesn't mean you put it in there. There's only the numbers of 5, 7, and 3 represented. So you only write one of each number that you have. Same goes for the range. You have 2 10s and 2 9s. So your range set will just be the number 10 and 9. Okay, yes, they're going to be not equal in length, but that's okay. It's naming what's there and making sure you're naming it appropriately. All right, so taking a look at another table. If I have -10, -11, -1, and -13 on the x side, and then 4, 4, 2, and 2 on the right side. Again, we're just practicing naming domain and range. So our domain equals whatever our x numbers is. So if we look over there, I don't see anything repeating, so I'm just going to list them in the order that they show up. -10, -11, -1, -13. And close my braces. For the range, there is a duplicate of the 4 and of the 2. So my range values will only consist of 4 and 2. You don't need to list each one that you have multiple times. All right, so be careful with that when you're writing your domain and range. All right, then the last part of your notes is going to go through something that involves math. All right, this is what is known as function notation. And I already kind of gave you a hint as what it looks like in some of the previous examples. All right, so we're going to talk more specifically about what it is and what you do with it. All right, but function notation is where you see the f of x. All right, and that's how it's read. Remember, this is what I said on the other slides at the beginning, or the other examples at the beginning. F of x is read f of x, not f times x, but f of x. Okay. All right, so anytime we're doing function notation, to find the value of a certain number, this is how you go through these problems. And it works this way every single time. All right, so to find the value of a certain number, you're going to substitute, that's the key phrase here, you're going to substitute the number into the rule for x and simplify. And by simplify, I mean use the order of operations. All right, so here's what a few of these are going to look like. We're going to do about 2 of them, and then I'll show you a third example that involves it, but in a different way. All right, so the directions are now going to say find each function value. All right, so when we go, let's see, what are we on? Number 5. Here's what the problem is going to look like. It's going to say find f of 9 if f of x equals 10 minus 3x. So you'll notice that you've been given a couple things in this problem. You've been given a value in the parentheses instead of the letter x, that number 9, and you've been given the actual function f of x equals 10 minus 3x. All right, so there's some key parts to this. This 9 right here is in place of the x. That's what you're going to substitute in for the x over on the right-hand side. You still have the rule, just like you would for a table, but we're not making a table because we're only doing one value. But the rule is where you plug that number into. So the work for this literally looks like this. It's f of 9 equals, and then you're going to take 10 minus 3 times 9, and we're going to simplify that right-hand side. Don't mess with the left-hand side. It's going to stay f of 9 no matter what. Right? But then you still have to do order of operations. Multiplying goes first, so -3 times 9 is going to be a minus 27, and then bring the 10 down, and then clean it up a little bit more. So f of 9 equals 10 minus 27, which is -17. Now, if you look at your answer, there's some information that you just received off of this. You know the 9 is the x value. That's your input. That's your domain. And that's your x value. Those are those synonyms right there. And then over here where the -17 is, that is your output. You put the 9 in and out comes a -17. That is your range. And that is your y value. Right? So when you get the final answer, you have all of that information included right there in front of you. You just have to know how to read it and where everything is and what it stands for. All right, so let's take a look at another one from here. If I have find f of -5 if f of x equals -2x plus 8. It'll always be set up like this. So once you get used to the routine of what you're doing, it's no different. All right, so the -5 is your x value. We're going to plug it in over here on the side where the rule is for the x. So f of -5 equals -2 times -5 plus 8. Okay, and then we're going to do our order of operations. Multiplying has to go first. So f of negative 5 equals positive 10 plus 8, which means f of negative 5 equals 18. Okay, so the math is really the order of operations, but you've got to plug in the number correctly to make it happen. All right, and then the last type of problem you will see pertaining to function notation, right, that we'll have to make sure you know in terms of 8th grade math, is going to ask you to do this. It's going to ask you to find the range to a function, and I'm going to tell you that the function is 1 minus 8x if the domain is the set 0, 2, and negative 5. So basically in this problem, what we're doing is we are giving you an actual function and we're giving you 3 domain values, and your job is going to be to come up with the 3 range values. All right, and you have a couple of options with this. Because you know that domain is x, these 3 values right here that they gave you, those are your x values. You could set this up in a table and come out with your answers because you need the range, which is the same thing as the y values. So if you set it up in a table, you would have x first, like you normally do. Your rule is 1 minus 8x in the middle, and then the y value would be the range that you're looking for. So once you get that last column, you'd be done, right? Otherwise, you can do 3 little baby problems like the ones we did above and get your 3 answers that way. But you have to use 0, 2, and negative 5 as your x values. So when I plug in the rule, those 3 numbers, it's 1 minus 8 times 0. And again, do your multiplication first, right? So if you want to come off to the side and do the math, this is what it would look like. And then 8 times 0 is 0, so 1 minus 0 gives us 1. So the first y value is 1, right? Then we'll take and plug in 2. 1 minus 8 times 2, right? So then it's 1 minus 8 times 2. You're going to multiply first right here. Negative 8 times 2 is minus 16, or negative 16. Bring the 1 down. 1 minus 16 is negative 15, so that means negative 15 goes right here. Then you can plug in negative 5. 1 minus 8 times negative 5. Right, and over here off to the side, so you can see my work, we're going to multiply first. Negative 8 times negative 5 is a positive 40. Bring the 1 down. 1 plus 40 makes 41. Right. So there's your table completed. Now, in order to write your final answer, you can't just leave it in the table and circle the table. Yes, these 3 values right here are your final answers, but because it gave it to you in a set of domain, you want to say that the range equals and put those 3 numbers in braces, like they're supposed to be for range values, right? And this is what the final answer is supposed to look like, right? So you can do 3 little baby function notations, or you can set it up in a table, but regardless, if you are given 3 x values, you must come out with 3 y values for your final answer. Right, we'll keep working with this in class and making sure that you fine-tune these skills, but you can tell that there's minimal calculations. It's a lot of vocabulary. Make sure you know the vocabulary.